Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about Home Manager. So what is Home Manager? Home Manager takes the philosophy of Nix and NixOS and applies it to all of your Dotfiles and user level applications. Rather than affecting the system-wide configuration, it's focused on the user level configuration. So just like the rest of NixOS, Home Manager makes distinctive generations of all of your dot files every time you switch into a new configuration, making it very easy to roll back your configuration if something goes wrong. And the way that Home Manager accomplishes this is by taking Nix files like home.nix and translating them into generated dot files, which occupy the normal locations that they would as symlinks. So for example, if I open up a terminal and I just list everything in my home directory, for example, my zshrc, you see that it's a symlink to this thing in the Nix store. Same thing with the zsh environment file, same thing with a ton of other things, the bashrc as well. And you can imagine then that all of the dot files on your system, whether it be your bashrc, your Emacs config, your NeoVim config, your tiling window manager config. All of these become these symlinks that are managed through the power of Nix. And this has a number of advantages to it. One, we already mentioned that it's really easy to roll back all of these. And another thing is that Home Manager is really good at managing multiple different setups and allowing you to switch back and forth between them. Because whenever you switch into a new configuration, it will tear down all of the previous configuration files and then put in the new ones that you specify. So it's really nice if you want to have a few different setups or configurations at your disposal, or also if you're trying to migrate from one setup to another. This actually helped me quite a bit when I was trying to switch from Xmonad to Hyperland. I had my Xmonad set up in NixOS. I got it working. It was optimized to my workflow. And then I wanted to try Hyperland. Home Manager allowed me to experiment with Hyperland and start configuring it while still being able to switch back to my Xmonad config to do actual work whenever I needed to. So that's sort of what Home Manager is and why it might be useful. But how do we get started with it? So there's a nice install guide at the Home Manager website. Here's the Home Manager manual. It'll be linked down in the description below. And there are actually multiple different ways of installing Home Manager. The way I prefer to have it set up is using the standalone installation, but there's also the NixOS module installation. Essentially, the difference between them is the standalone installation is completely managed by the user accounts, and there is a clear separation between the system configuration and the user configuration. The system configuration will be in our configuration.nix from last time, and the user level configuration will be in the home.nix file. One of the advantages to this is that you don't actually require root to get this up and running. So setting up your configuration this way is technically a little more portable because you could take your Home Manager configuration to a system that you don't have admin privileges on. The NixOS module setup, on the other hand, is slightly different. Instead of separating the user level config and the system level config, they're actually in the same file. They're both included in the configuration.nix file. And so for this one, you sort of have to have root privileges. And so for this one, you sort of have to have root privileges. But the advantage to this is that you can control all of the dot files of multiple users on the entire system at once. Both of these will work for a single user system. If you're like me and you think it's cleaner to have the system level and user level stuff separated, I recommend doing the standalone installation. But if you're going to be using this to manage a computer that multiple people are using and you want to manage their .files, go ahead and use the NixOS module setup, because that is definitely superior in that use case. Since I use the standalone installation, this is the one we're going to go through in this video. Though later on, I will make a NixOS module home manager setup video if you guys want to see that. So here we are. We can click the instructions here and here they are. So we're going to run these inside of our VM from last time. Okay, so here we are again back in the VM. I got the home manager manual here. We're going to standalone installation 1.1. The first decision you have to make is whether or not you're on the unstable or latest stable channel. If you're unstable like me, go ahead and grab the top two commands. And if you're running the latest stable, grab the bottom two. I actually think that this VM is running the stable channel, so we're going to just grab these two. Put those into your terminal, hit enter, and what this will do is pull the home manager channel into your system, but it does not yet actually install home manager as a command. In order to get home manager as a command, we need to install it. That'll be this command right here. Now, at this step, there's a common error where it'll just say something like home manager is not found or source not found. If you see that error, just go ahead and log out. So do a full log out, log back in, and try it again. It should fix it at that point. There's sometimes just an error with like the environment variables and the user environment and stuff like that, and relogging in will fix the issue. Once it finishes, it should hopefully say starting home manager activation, creating profile generation 1, and all that good stuff. So if you see something like this, it means that the home manager install was successful. Now, as an astute observer, you may be wondering, wait, isn't NixOS like supposed to be declarative? Why are we running commands to install our packages? I thought we should be like putting it into the configuration file and then switching. Well, what happens with home manager is home manager declaratively manages itself. And so you have to bootstrap it into the system before it is fully declarative. From here though, the basic way of interacting with home manager is now declarative. We can go to .config/home manager, and you should see a home.nix file. And if you open this up and look at it, you'll notice it bears a resemblance to the configuration.nix file, but now we have different sets of options like home.username, home.home directory, and a few more things like home.packages. If you want to have packages that are only available to your user account and not system-wide, you could add them in here into this home.packages block, just like the system packages block from configuration.nix. Now to show you real quick a basic configuration, I'm just going to add the hello package to the home.packages block here. It's already there. You just need to uncomment it. You can then save the file, and then in order to switch into this new configuration and have access to the hello program, which we do not have that right now, there's a command similar to the NixOS rebuild command, but instead it's the home manager command. So the command is just home-manager switch. And when you do this, it will read the home.nix file, figure out what it needs to change. And in this case, it was just installing the hello program. So now we have the hello program, which is super awesome. Before we get too in-depth into this, I want to show you how to incorporate this home.nix file into the .dotfiles directory that we started last time. So essentially what we're going to do is copy the home.nix file that we just looked at into the .dotfiles directory. So now everything is all in one place. And from here, if we want to make this work with our flake, we're going to have to make a few edits to the flake. Switching back real quick into my host system, I'm going to edit the flake.nix inside of my fully set up Emacs config again so that we can see things just a little bit nicer. So here it is. Here is our flake from last time. So in order to incorporate Home Manager into the flake, we're going to need to add Home Manager as an input. So Home Manager, of course, has a URL, just like Nix Packages does. In this case, it's going to be GitHub, Nix Community, Home Manager, and then we're using release-23.05. That is the branch. If you're using unstable Nix packages, this would just be the master branch. But Home Manager also takes in Nix packages as an input. So if the version of Nix packages right here is different from the version of Nix packages that Home Manager is using, we're going to have some problems. So in order to fix that, we have another line where it is homemanager.inputs.nixpackages.follows equals Nix packages. So what this says is make sure that the versions of Nix packages that are being referenced in both of these are the exact same. That will be it for the inputs block, but now for the outputs block. In the outputs block, we have this nice handy function here that is telling us how to build the NixOS system configuration. But now we need to add another part of this that declares the home configurations. In order to do this, we're going to need to pass Home Manager as an input here, because it needs Home Manager in order to build the home configuration. And then we're going to make another section similar to NixOS configurations, but in this case, it's home configurations. So right after the block that defines our NixOS configurations, we're going to make another block for home configurations. And the structure for this is going to be very similar to what is happening in the NixOS configurations block. So then to see this a little bit better, I'm going to open up this view on the side here so you can see the hierarchy. And one of the things that's really cool is that the structure of this home configurations block is going to be very similar to the structure of the NixOS configurations block. So if we can actually copy all of this and just make some modifications in here. So if you can sort of see on the side, they're going to have a similar structure, but we're going to be modifying what these actual contents are. So in the NixOS configuration, we wanted to define the configuration for the system. So we used the host name of the system, NixOS-tutorial. But since this is configuration for the user, we want to define it for the particular user. So the default method of setting this up is just giving the name of your user. In this case, I have it as Libre Phoenix. This configuration is not supposed to be a NixOS system. It's supposed to be a Home Manager configuration. It's supposed to be a set of .files that get activated on the system. So we can't use the NixOS system function anymore. Instead, the function to use is right here, homemanager.lib.homemanager-configuration. Now the Home Manager configuration has modules just like the system does, but in this case, the module is no longer the configuration.nix, it is now the home.nix. One more thing we got to do before this Home Manager configuration function works is change this system argument, which it actually doesn't take as an argument, into the package set, which is what it needs in order to run. The common way of doing this is by declaring packages, or pkgs for short, in the let binding and setting it to nixpackages.legacy packages dot and then whatever the architecture type is in quotes. So in this case, it's going to be x86-64-Linux. Then in order for Home Manager configuration, the function, to know about that, we can put in inherit packages. What the inherit thing does is it takes whatever the variable is declared as in the let binding and passes that as an argument to the function or into wherever it is. And so then one thing you're probably noticing that might be driving you a bit insane is that we actually reference the architecture type twice here, and here. And what is perfect for abstracting out multiple declarations of that? Another variable. So to make this just a little bit more optimized, we can actually declare the system architecture up here as system and set that to whatever architecture you're using. And then instead of packages equals all of this, at the end, we're going to change this to $, squiggly brackets, and then system. It's kind of like Bash, where the $, and squiggly brackets can be used to expand whatever the variable means. And then this should work. And bonus points, if you notice this early, we can also now pass the system in to the NixOS system function as an inherit by using inherit system. And all of that should work nicely. Now the declaration for the system architecture is just in one place, which is very beautiful. So assuming I did not forget any semicolons, this should now be a functioning Flake config with both the NixOS configuration and the Home Manager configuration in it. So then how do we work with this in the actual system? Well, if we go back to the VM here and navigate back to the .files directory, we have everything together here. The way we actually synchronize our configuration now that we have the Flake set up, will be similar to how we changed the NixOS rebuild command, and that we're just going to run home manager switch -- flake and then pass in the directory. And it looks like I got an error here. Permission denied on the flake.lock file. Yeah, I have no idea why the flake.lock file is owned by root, but I guess we can just fix that there. Okay, and now we'll run that command again. You should see some sort of output like this, where it goes ahead and reinstalls stuff according to the actual flake.lock file. And then all the versions of all the packages for both the system and the home manager configuration will be tied to the flake.lock file. And whenever it decides to finish here, we're good. So there we go. At this point, we have a .files directory. The system configuration is in it. The user configuration is in it. Just as a quick recap, if you're using Flakes like me, to update your system, you can navigate to your .files directory or whatever directory you have all of these in and run nix flake update. What this will do is go ahead and update the flake.lock file, so any subsequent switches will be using updated packages. To update the system, you'll run sudo nixos -rebuild switch -- flake and then for the actual directory, #, and then the name of the configuration if your configuration name is different from your host name. And then it's a similar story for home manager switch -- flake followed with a # and the name of whatever the home manager configuration is if it's not the name of your user account. Okay, so from here, how do we get home manager to actually do useful stuff for us? Well, this is going to involve us exploring the thousands and thousands of options that are out there for various programs and embedding them into the home.nix. We're going to go over Bash and ZSH as an example because probably everyone will want to be configuring their shell in some capacity, and it's a very good example of how this configuring in the home.nix file actually does work. So to do this, you can open up the home.nix file. I'm going to open it up on my host system again inside my Emacs, and there we are. From here, you'll also want to have mynixos.com opened up on the side because it's a very useful tool for exploring the kinds of configuration options we can now mess with. So starting with Bash, so what sort of things can we do to configure Bash? If you open up mynixos and then just search Bash, you will get a ton of different things. But we can narrow this down a little bit further. Since we're concerned with home manager, we can add a space, home manager, and then we get all the home manager options for bash. So you can look through these. There's tons and tons of them, but the most important thing to do if you want to have home manager manage any of your configurations is make sure that you set enable to true. This one, for example, here, programs.bash.enable. If you set this to true, then your bash RC and related bash files will be created by home manager as those symlinks that we were looking at earlier. So we can start off by adding that into our configuration wherever we would like. I'll put it right over here. So it's programs.bash.enable equals true. With this, any other options that we configure in the home.nix related to bash will then be reflected in the auto-generated bash RC. Something that everyone should have in their bash RC are aliases. So how do we get aliases in bash? Well, if we search for aliases, we're going to find programs.bash.shell aliases. And if you look at this, you'll see it is an attribute set of strings, meaning it's going to be set to some squiggly brackets with a bunch of things set equal to each other. So it's not necessarily the same syntax as you would see in a bash RC, where it's actually, alias ll equals quotes ls-l. It's a slightly different syntax, but this is the Nix configuration syntax, which makes it really nice. So we could go ahead here and grab this configuration and just plug it into programs.bash.shell aliases, I believe it was. And there we go, making sure not to forget a semicolon. Maybe we want to format it a little bit nicer here. And so then again, as you're seeing here on the side, this forms this hierarchy again. So we have bash, enable is set to true, and there's other properties, shell aliases, and then within that there's another hierarchy, which is really, really cool. And as we learned last time, you could rewrite this in a slightly different way. Instead of repeating programs.bash twice, we could instead write it like this: programs.bash equals, and then we have our brackets, enable equals true, and then shell aliases equals all of this fun stuff right here. And those two things are functionally equivalent. The dot just means go down one level in the hierarchy that we see over here on the right side. Now, if we go back into the VM, so now with that updated bash configuration in the home.nix, we could switch into this new configuration, home manager switch -- flake, and then passing in our directory. And this works nicely. If we navigate out and we cat the .bashrc, there's a bunch of other stuff in here, but you will see it added in those two aliases. And now if we run one of those aliases, we'll get to see that the bash RC is in fact a symlink linking to this thing in the Nix store. Pretty awesome. ZSH is configured similarly. If you want to use ZSH, you can just search ZSH home manager, and then you'll get all of the options for ZSH. And you can explore these as you like, but some of these are similar enough to the bash options that we could honestly just take the configuration from bash here, copy it, and just replace this with .zsh, go back into our VM, switch into the new configuration, and now it's doing something similar for ZSH. Now again, one of the things you'll notice here is that we're duplicating our definition of shell aliases. They're the exact same thing for both bash and ZSH in this example. So if we wanted to, we could abstract these out into a variable by going up to the top and using another let binding. Let bindings are used to pass in variables. So we could say let my aliases equal, and then we'll grab the definition here, like so, and then say in let my aliases equal all of this in this whole block here. All we would have to do then is change both of these shell aliases equals to say my aliases. And I think something went wrong with some of the squiggly brackets here. There we go. So with that, then we can switch into the new configuration again. And everything works like expected. Quick tip then on the side here, if you want to switch your default shell from bash to something like ZSH, that is a system level configuration. So that configuration is not going to be in home.nix, but rather in configuration.nix. And the relevant configuration looks something like this. So environment.shells equals with packages, and then whatever shells you want on the system, bash, ZSH, and fish, or just one of them if you want. The default shell, whichever one you want, ZSH, bash, or fish, and then just making sure to enable the one that you have selected as the default shell, and you'd be good to go. From here on out, there are lots and lots of options here that you can mess around with. To search for options for a particular package, I recommend just searching for the package, say for example Vim, and along with searching Home Manager if you're trying to configure a user level .file, or Nix packages/option if you're looking for a configuration that would be system level. Anything that's marked as Nix packages/option would be in the configuration.nix, and anything that is in Home Manager/option would of course go in the home.nix file. Now, if you are a nerd like me and you have tons and tons of .files for various things on your system, it is a very daunting task to try and migrate all of those .files into this Home Manager setup. So of course, if you're looking at migrating to Home Manager, you can take it slow and migrate one thing at a time. Putting in the normal .files in their normal places without Home Manager will still work totally fine. But there is also one more trick that Home Manager has up its sleeve that allows very quick migration from a normal configuration file into Home Manager. And that is with the home.file option, which is a set of files to link into the user home. There's two main ways of using this, and this is again back in the home.nix file. The first way of using the home.file property is by just putting the contents of the file inside of Home Manager. And you do this by writing home.file. And then in quotes the path to the actual file. So if I was gonna put in my hyperland config, this would be .config/hyper/hyperland.conf, and then .text equals. We can then use these sets of double single quotes, and between those single quotes paste in the entire contents of the config. What this says is write this text into the .config/hyper/hyperland.conf file as a symlinked file, just like we saw in the bash rc. Now, if you don't want your home.nix file to get absurdly large very quickly, there's another method of doing this, where instead of passing it the actual text, we pass the source. And the source would be a path to the actual config file. So we could take an existing hyperland.conf file or whatever configuration file. Once we have it available in the .dotfiles directory, we can just source it like this. And that will work similarly. One last thing I want to mention here before we wrap up is what to do if you end up breaking something. Because NixOS and Nix are supposed to allow you to roll back, but Home Manager rollbacks are not necessarily intuitive, but they are pretty easy. So in order to roll back into a previous configuration, you start by running Home Manager generations. And what this will do is output a list of all of the generations you have previously switched into. And they should be in reverse chronological order, with the most recent one being at the top. So once you've figured out which generation you want to roll back to, all you have to do is copy the path to the Nix store for that generation and add /activate and run that. Activate is a script that is in every single one of these generations, and it is the activation script. It is what sets up the system to have all the .files and symlinks be in their correct places. So I hope you learned something. I hope that this was a good entry point into Home Manager. Next time, we're going to be looking at how we can expand our configuration to be much more modular. And after that, I'll be taking requests for tutorials on how to configure specific applications, maybe like Emacs or NeoVim or tiling window managers or Hyperland or whatever. If there's a particular setup that you want me to go over how to get a basic configuration running in NixOS and with Home Manager, let me know down in the comments below. So if you liked the video, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. If you disliked the video, please leave a dislike and let me know what you disliked about the video. That's all for today, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.